my name's Lyndon, and I'm an artist in residence for Back from the Brink, and we are launching our anthology. We are a many-bodied singing thing today. We couldn't meet in person, so we decided to do a virtual launch, and we have readings from lots of different contributors from all over the world, who have recorded a reading for you to listen to today to launch the book. The book is an anthology of speculative fiction and poetry, and it's inspired by the conservation work of Back from the Brink, which is a really big conservation, not just one conservation project, 19 conservation projects all over England, saving some of England's most endangered species. I was really inspired by a couple of the projects which really spoke to my love of speculative fiction. One of them is the Willow Tip project, which is saving a tiny little bird who lives in post-industrial landscapes, and it excavates its nest holes from rotting trees. And the post-industrial thing really appealed to that speculative fiction kind of vibe to me. And the other one is Ancients of the Future, and they are making sure that there are ancient trees going forward in the future. There's a generation gap. And I loved the idea of planting trees now which were going to be ancient and see our world change over the next several hundred years, and what would they see? So I did a call out and I asked poets to be inspired by these different projects, and they came back with obviously magnificent pieces of writing which are really inspiring. So I'm really excited to share them with you. You can watch the launch, sit back with a glass of some kind of celebratory drink and join us to celebrate the book, and you can also download the full book for free on this webpage as well. Enjoy!
This is a poem written by Ruth Gilchrist called The Crow Learns the Names. Crow flew over the field, and where her wing dipped and feathers brushed the tall grasses, frost grew. When she reached the house, Crow landed in the fir tree and called to her mother, Woman. It had been a long time since the woman had looked out on the world. Now she opened the window. Through the open window came Hercium, Coralloids, Zygodon forestri, Lycertia agilis, and with them came Lamosa lamosa. But the woman did not know their names, and she was confused. In her distress, her hair grew across her face, making her angry. Outrage made her weep and hide her head. Outside, Crow grew impatient and bounced across the lawn, shattering frost under her claws, tossing leaves in the air, feeling the breath from the last leaves fall, and hearing Crow's jibe. The woman folded self-pity away with anger and put them away in a drawer so she could leave the house. She went to her neighbor, the river. There she asked the names of the beings she had let in. The river taught her their names are coral tooth fungi, knothole moss, sand lizard, and with them has come black-tailed godwit. Because the river told her these names, they became etched in the woman's mind, and she could remember them. The woman talked with the river for a long time about these things, so the river also gave her the ancestral stories for these creatures. At the end of the evening, the woman returned to her house, and Crow went with her, half bounding, half flying, bringing the darkness behind her. Because the woman now knew their names, she could make a home for these beings in her place, and from their stories came their songs. The woman sang these stories to the fire, so her daughter Crow could sit all night with one ear to the chimney. Once Crow had heard the songs, she stretched out her wings, pushed blue up from the sea, and with her beak she bled orange into the sky. Crow then flew over the land, swooping low over towns and villages, hamlets and cities, calling as she went. So in their last dreams, all the children heard these names from Crow: coral tooth fungi, knothole moss, sand lizard, and black-tailed godwit. Across the land, at the breakfast tables, on school buses, in walks across the parks, children spoke these names, and their knowledge grew out of their toes and into the ground, weaving a web through the soil. As she dozed in the pale light from the open window, the woman sensed this web as it flowed up the chair legs, and she smiled. Crow learns the names. Read by Guy Gilchrist.
Hi, my name's Hayley and I'm the Outreach Officer for the Ancients of the Future project. The project is all about protecting our ancient tree landscapes and the species, some of which are incredibly rare, associated with ancient trees. Ancient trees today are under significant threats and face challenges such as tree disease and climate change, and the continuity of the really valuable wildlife habitat that they provide is now at risk because there's a generation gap between those existing ancient trees and those trees that are going to become the ancients of the future, so the next generation. Our project aims to address this, and we're working on 19 sites across England, which are all really important, prestigious sites for ancient and veteran trees that have wood pasture or parkland habitat. And our aim is to work with landowners and site managers to ensure that ancient trees are protected and thrive into the future. We work with many endangered species, so that the project has a number of target species that it works with. And these really vary from bats such as the Bechstein bat to fungi such as the oak polypore, lichens such as the geranium firedot, and invertebrates such as the violet click beetle, and even mosses such as the knothole moss. So many of our species have really cool names, but not many people know much about them, and that is because they're so specialist to dead wood or decaying wood or aged bark, of which they depend upon for part of their life cycle, and this is an increasingly rare habitat. For example, the violet click beetle is found in tree hollows, feeding on wood mold that can take up to 100 years to accumulate. So they're really specialist species. I have an example here for you. I have a noble chafer, which is one of our target species. And noble chafers are really associated with the fruit growing regions of England, such as Herefordshire and Worcestershire, feeding on wood mold again in hollows in old fruit trees. But there's also records for them in the New Forest, where there's very few fruit trees. So part of the project is to try and understand more about our target species, so that can inform management going forward, so we better protect them into the future. So from everyone at the project, we just want to say a big thank you for being involved, and yeah, thanks very much. Bye.
Hello, this is Ousel Park Log Store by Rob Lowe. Like skulls in catacombs, row upon row of thought, they rest, glaring at us. These bowls' roarings declare, as sightless sockets do, defiance of the good that put them in this place. I am outstared by them, the circles of the years, cracked scars of drying wood, the records of a past. These are my ancestors, and sometimes from the bark, tiny sprouting green leaves emerge back into days. When you stare long enough, even the dead will move, and from the common tombs, individuals speak, resisting the governments that harvested their lives. Yet the wood is friendly, as are the bone-smooth skulls, and if I rest my hands still upon each surface, hosts of voices murmur, everything done remains. I am calm as the land. Thank you.
The improbability of it intrigues, though maybe not so much if you stop and think that we are here at all, with boots planted, spinning in addling revolution, settled in the riparian mud, the sulphurous bubbles, and a breath of early leaves. The bank is mapped with long feet, little feet, herons, rats, and the pearly sheen of oily algae going about their glistening business, anointers of the sucking mud that holds its offerings closest, filling the nose of the Bronze Age sacrifice, cradling the dropwort to weep by the water. All we offer now are slender limbs, torn from the warming air and set, branches askew, almost comically confused in a world at right angles, a strange topsy-turvy birth. These will be the last daughters of mothers drying to monuments to a time of lush floodplains. Their many-knuckled limbs reach out for a future to a land that will claim its ebbs and flows and idles again, to a river that will once again have its rain.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Garnett from Darwin, Australia, and this is my tale, Sitting Beneath Bats. For the 60th time, I ask myself what I'm doing here in the depths of a cave in Wales, and for the 60th time, I look at my IE, my inner eye, and watch the time and payment tick over. I'm so used to getting paid by the millicent that pounds feel unreal. I'm here for the pay, and there's no cation way I'd be here elsewise. I sink back into the cushion of the float and do a 360-degree scan for the cache of it. I'm in a cave, like no cave I've ever lived. Not that I've actually been in a cave before, but I've lived a whole case lot of them, load of vids. And a cave in a vid is pretty much defined by the roof spikes, floor spikes, and lots of pretty wall colours. This cave's different. It stinks, even inside my aircon bubble, and I wish I'd closed it before I floated anywhere near the entrance. The ground is covered in this stuff my IE tells me is guano. But that's just a fancy name for stuff that makes me very thankful I never have to touch the ground. My IE, reacting to my subconscious, tells me the real rock floor is 12 metres down. I shudder, wishing I could block my nose, but that would decrease my pay. So instead I take a long sip of hyper, delighting in the liquid kick of amphetamine. It's a mix designed to both enhance and separate my senses, and the rate of pay jumps in response. I've never seen that before. But then I've never done an actual physical research gig either. I mean, I'm pretty much being paid to sit, to see, even to smell. But it's a far cry of being paid simply for my computational power. My mate, Mandy, hooked it up for me after I tweaked her tribute percentile in Destiny, so she'd level up quicker. She'd been hunting for affiliates for ages. but I'm the first to take her up on it, because it's an actual physical job. Well, mine isn't a physical job like hers, because I'm paid to sit, though I still have to get dressed, talk face to face and travel before I could sit. First time I've ever had to do that. Clothes are weird. Mandy actually has to stand and walk around and stuff. She's still paid to watch, because that's what her job is. Mine too, really. But standing's such a chore. Have to pay me a cageful to get me upright. So, the way Mandy tells it, she's been paid to watch traffic, to watch people cook, and even to watch the scientists that built the latest asteroid peeling drone. Not to watch the drone itself, apparently, but to watch the scientists as they put it through its paces. When I asked if she had proof you could peel asteroids, she said the memory had been redacted, so she couldn't live it with me. I'm not sure. I'd want to lose bits of my memory, but the payout looked wired. Oh. Anyhow, this position came up and Mandy sent it my way. She said she'd have taken it, but was too busy watching grass grow. I thought she was joking. But the vid she sent me in reply is the most boring moment I've ever lived. Ever. I sent in my app with Mandy's tag, and sooner than I expected, these chiropterologists, or so my IE says, wanted to meet in person. Now, from Mandy, I knew I'd have to travel. But to actually meet face to face? So aged. I didn't think that happened anymore. Weird. I got clothes printed, and for the first time ever got dressed for work. Then I had to travel clear across the world to meet them. Luckily, so few people travel now that I was able to sell my live feed and even get sponsors for the flight. I've got a really good feed because my parents coded me with the best genes in the market. Sensors, computational power, even mega memory. I use some, sure. But I've never had much use for the feed. Apparently, if I ever want to travel, I'd be set for life. But it's not my thing. Way too much movement. I got the shock of my life when I met the scientists. They weren't connected at all. Oh, a couple had mods for better eyesight or hearing, and one even had a cyber tongue. But I couldn't live with them at all. Apparently, they thought I was really weird too. After staring at me for ages, one finally said he'd never seen anyone so pale. It didn't really make sense to me. I got Asian parents and I clearly had more melanin in my skin than a couple of them. To prove I could watch and sit, they ran me through a couple of tests, at which point I almost told them to cage the whole thing. But the tick of actual dollars was enough to keep my attention. Finally, They accepted my ability to sit, and I gave them access to my feed, which really sealed the deal. Then they told me about the project, about the need to know how many bats there were and their roosting habits. I didn't give a flap. Bats flap, get it? But Mandy told me that the employers always thought that what they were doing was the most important thing in the world, so I kept quiet. I wondered how she managed to fake an interest in grass growing. I must have been convincing, because I got the job. Now, as I sit, with 80% of my mind taken up by producing and transmitting my feed, I wonder the eccentricities of scientists. I'm being paid to watch. So an actual physical computer can count and analyse the interactions of these nocturnal bats. The thing is, it's daytime now, and they're all asleep above me, and I only have my standard aircon bubble between me and becoming part of the floor. I can see all these tiny little mites on the floor, and it occurs to me that the bat people didn't purchase full rights to my feed. Maybe there's a entomologist I can on-sell to. Just so long as none of these mites actually touch me. Next time I get a break, I'm definitely buying a reinforced bubble and a more powerful anti-grav mod. At least now, I'll be able to afford them. On my IE, the time and my payment tick over, forestalling my 61st question.
Waggle dancers. Who knew how the apple was made? We decrypted rumours, white whiskers of truth from the textbooks of the day. Some things were certain. We'd no orchards, no farms, no vineyards or Everglades, just buzzing recollections from kaput holotapes. So we placed our faith in technology, trusted the data. We built solar wings, hives of nano-replica apis to seek and recover. Now they swarm space. We hope they fly safe in their waggle dance through distant galaxies. We're the workers, tracking signals we don't know the tail end of. We need a cachet, a golden seed of DNA to name our savior. We've no gods anymore, but we pray that the bees will return, save us from our self-made endless drift, our fruitless catastrophe.
Hi there, my name's Emma Burt and I'm the Community and Outreach Officer for Back from the Brink, and I'm here to talk to you today about the willow tit and the project that we have especially for this amazing bird. Willow tit actually declined between 1970 and 2012. We had a drastic decline of this species, 94%, which is just astonishing. It's a small, stocky and quietly coloured little bird that's often mistaken for the marsh tit, which looks very, very similar. It's like the UK's most threatened resident bird currently. So yeah, this is why the Back from the Brink project has come about. They spend a lot of the time in the same area, favouring damp scrub or young woodlands. They'll eat berries, insects, seeds in the winter times. Rather remarkably, they actually excavate their own nest holes. So the female will only lay eggs in a hole that she herself has dug. So they're very particular little birds. They love the kind of soft, rotting wood that you find in those lovely damp areas. So as a result, they very rarely use traditional nest boxes. So that in itself has been a problem. So why are these birds in trouble? Well, they are quite sedentary. They're very vulnerable to loss and fragmentation of habitat, and they like old industrial areas which generate scrub and young woodland, but these are often considered by many wasteland, which is such a shame. So even if these areas are not developed, they will eventually turn to mature woodland if not managed and become unsuitable for willow tits. So we've focused our project up in Yorkshire in the Dearne Valley, and the focus of that is in largely post-industrial landscapes. There is also a surviving population up there, and that's what we're working on. So how are we going to help this small little bird? How have we been helping for the last 2-3 years? Well, this project, the Willow Tit Back from the Brink project, led by Yorkshire Wildlife Trust and the RSPB, will help the willow tits in the Dearne Valley by ensuring there is a good habitat for them and improving linkage between patches, so creating these corridors between the habitats. Annual surveys will allow us to monitor, and that's what we've been doing to date. We've been monitoring the willow tits across the area. It's been fascinating, getting volunteers involved locally, bringing them in, getting habitat maintenance work done. Sophie Pinder, who is the project officer for this project, has been absolutely fantastic, and I just want to say thank you at this point from all of us at Back from the Brink to everyone who's been involved to date. We're going to continue working with landowners around land management and how we can better the area and the habitat for these amazingly rare birds. So by the end of the project, which is fairly soon, we're talking the next year, we will hopefully have improved the conservation status of the willow tit in the Dearne Valley by learning about their needs, building on existing good partnerships to safeguard their future, and hopefully we discover about how we continue to improve the habitat for this incredibly rare bird. So if you want to get involved in the project, go to our website, that's naturebftb.co.uk, or to follow everything that we do, then please visit us on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube and Twitter at naturebftb. We'll see you there, and I hope that you enjoy this work. Bye!
Oh, hello there. My name is Robert Garnham, and this is a short story called Tit. I love you more than any tit, was my first reaction. How could this possibly be? I thought I was irresistible, and that love, passion, moving as they do through the ether, mysterious and life-affirming, would be mine by rights. I'd never even thought they would be conditional on factors outside of my control. But when he'd said, "I'll only love you when the willow tit is secure in its natural habitat," I knew I was probably shafted. I also knew that he was worth it. If the willow tit were to go extinct, then so too would be any hope of a meaningful relationship with him, Ethan. There was even something bird-like about his name. His face was earnest. He leaned across the table in the trendy coffee shop with its bare brick walls and blackboard menu, and he said, "There's a passion lingering deep within, and I ache for the sweet embrace of love. But I cannot imagine a world without the willow tit. Did you know that it has been known to excavate nest holes in rotting deadwood on post-industrial landscapes? But they're endangered, and to be honest, that's something of a turn-off." My throat had become very dry. I swallowed. How endangered are they? There's just a few thousand left. And you think we could make a go of it? You and me, I mean, the two of us. Yes, absolutely. In fact, I'm sure of it. But the willow tit will always come first. The serving robot brought us our coffee over to us, but it tasted bitter. And as I looked at Ethan, I felt within a certain degree of hopelessness. Why did life have to be like this? Just when I'd found someone so utterly gorgeous, who liked all of the things that I liked, and whose facial and psychic projections had almost matched exactly my own, a new factor had been introduced. Life was impossible. Or was it? The willow tit, you say? Ethan nodded solemnly. I'd always regarded myself as a prime catch, and my previous relationships had always been never been conditioned on the survival of a whole species. Except for the human species, of course, but that went without saying. Matt, James, Matt number 2 had all said at the start of our relationships that I was the perfect man and that nothing would ever happen that could possibly split us up. On each of these occasions, only one of these statements had turned out to be true. So naturally, when Ethan had added his bizarre condition to the success of our future romance, I knew that things would be different. For the next few days, I thought of nothing else but tits. It's true that my work suffered, and when my boss at the office where I design hologram dining tables asked what was bothering me, and I told her, a very funny look came over her face, and she sent me to the Human Resources Department. Everyone should have their passions, I told myself, both passions of the head and passions of the heart. But it's not often that the two are interlinked. The Human Resources robot could not understand the logic of this, and someone had to be sent in to reboot it. On the way home from the office, I decided to take a wander to the wasteland to the north of the city, a desolate place where iron and brick structures loomed in the permafog, and the street-like drones hovered gingerly on the periphery. Perhaps I just wasn't thinking particularly straight, but that's what love can do to the senses. I was still dressed in my work clothes, smart casual trousers and a pristine white shirt, a jacket slung over my shoulders as I stepped over piles of brick and stunted vegetation. And then I stood there for a while, listening to the sound of absolute nothingness. No birds could I hear, no insects nor creatures of any kind save the ceaseless rhythm of a factory somewhere close, churning out supermarket trolley wheels. Clong, ching, clong, ching, clong, ching. Tits? Someone asked. I jumped. No, I blurted. It doesn't matter, she said. You're all the same, the lot of you. She began to walk away. Wait! She was an elderly lady, bent over a walking cane, her unkempt white hair a halo around an incredibly craggy face. You do mean the bird? I asked. What the bloody hell did you think I meant? She spat. Never heard such a load of old nonsense in all my life. Neon shimmered through the fog in the distance. I could feel my voice close to me, as if I were indoors, and this made me feel self-conscious. Take me to your tits, I whispered. I haven't got a clue what you're talking about, and she began to walk away again. Hang on, wait! It's money, isn't it? Well, why didn't you say so? I've got money. Have you got a card reader with you? I don't need your money, soldier. All I know is that you are here for the willow tits. How on earth did you know that? Because you're all here for the willow tits. What do you mean? She sighed. Follow me. She was pretty agile for an old lady. She hopped over brambles and bushes, and I had difficulty following her. unwilling to stain my work trousers, and yet driven on by how happy Ethan might be on hearing the lengths I was going through for him. And all the time she walked, I could hear her muttering to herself a random spew of unconscious words. Coming along here for the willow tit, yes, the willow tit, Mr. Fancy Trousers with his willow tit obsession. Oh, yes, like he thinks I can't see right through him, as if he were one of them holograms, Mr. Fancy Trousers with his willow tits. So, what do you do? I asked. I work for the RSPB, obviously, soldier, she replied, or at least that's what it bloody feels like these days. So there's lots of interest in bird life around these parts? She stuck out her tongue and blew a raspberry. What the hell does that mean? Just keep close to me, soldier. We continued walking, and neither of us said anything for a while. Eventually we came across what had once been a mighty factory, but now was only 2 free-standing walls. 2 giant brick pieces of ruined architecture, like a massive book opened on a bed or 2 hands open in prayer. She stopped for a while and looked up at its structure. Well, I asked. Love, she replied. Pardon? You're doing this for love. How do you know? Well, it's not like you're going to buy me an ice cream, is it? Her face then softened. Who am I to stand in the way of love? If 2 people are meant to be together, then nothing can interfere with that kind of force, least of all me. I try to preserve this place. You? Who else? The Muffin Man? Are there any willow tits here? I asked. One big tit, as far as I can see. Her face softened again. I'm sorry. It's just, I've seen this all before. You know, we're all being overtaken by computers and robots. You know that, don't you? Everything has become tiny, microchips, electrical impulses. There's no real passion, and everything is counterfeit. But there are willow tits here. Robins, too. We're all trying to live together. I can't see any. Follow, she said. And she's off again. I follow. Only now I feel slightly differently towards her. I wonder how she survives out here in the harsh terrain. How does anyone survive? Aren't we all conditioned to environmental factors? She's muttering again as she walks. Coming along here for the willow tit, yes, the willow tit, Mr. Fancy Trousers with his willow tit obsession. Oh, yes, like he thinks I can't see right through him, as if he were one of them holograms, Mr. Fancy Trousers with his willow tits. She's still as sprightly as ever, though the fog seems to become even more dense. She hops over ditches and detritus, giant rusted pipes, and around abandoned cars and robots. Eventually we stop in the middle of nowhere, and she puts up her hand. Don't you think... Shh. I'm quiet. We're both quiet now, rooted to the spot. And then I see what she can see. Forms in the fog. Humanoid forms, standing still and staring into the miasma, which whirls and swirls, driven by unseen currents. And every now and then the fog clears for just a little to reveal that these are not robots, nor structures, nor statues. These are human beings, men, young men, such as myself, just standing there, with their hands beside them, staring around, heads slowly moving, mouths wide agape. What the hell is this? I ask. Like you, soldier. What does that mean? Look, she says. The fog clears momentarily. There must be 20 of them, 30 young men just standing there, looking around, mesmerised. They're all here, she says, for the willow tit. Every one of them. That's what happens, you see. Ethan sends them here. Promises love. Eternal love, a chance of everlasting happiness. Willow tit, one of them says, and another adds, willow tit, and a third, willow tit. And then they're all at it. Willow tit, willow tit, willow tit. This, she says, is Ethan's army. He's a hologram gone rogue. He was programmed to stand in a shopping precinct and sign people up for monthly direct debits, saving willow tits in their natural environments. And then he was reconditioned and sold to a dating website to be hired out for the evening. He had mind-controlling, mesmerising software installed to ensure that clients kept coming back. But something went wrong. There was a glitch. And the two parts of him combined, and this is what happened. He's out there every day, driving men wild and sending them out to this wasteland to look for willow tits. Do you know what, soldier? Do you want to know what the really good thing is? She looked at me as I shook my head. It's working. The willow tit population is increasing. They're working away. They're creating habitats. The species is back from the brink.
My name's Leslie Tate. I'm going to read you my poem Moving Images. It's about a film in the future that does get lost. It has two possible future scenarios. The first one is the disaster that we are very likely to face if we don't do anything about climate and biodiversity loss. And the second is a remake, which is really hopeful. Moving Images. The soundtrack to the film 2050, The Last Generation Speaks, has been lost. It vanished with the artworks of the London and New York galleries and the burnt-out desert stops of Angkor Wat and Great Zimbabwe. Like a cry in a storm, it came and went, then spread upwards on light wings to hover as a message in the sky, warning of Easter Island and Mohenjo-Daro. It had served its purpose. For us, it was a film in the head, rerun so often that the images had become Hand of God slides, streamed at all hours onto walls and ceilings. Seen by the elderly, it flashed up 1930s photos of empty shelves and queues at the bank. Reviewed by the screen buffs, it was a switch from unreal horror to a death in the living room, while for the dedicated gamers, it was World War III fought for real in hand-to-mouth emergencies. But then came the remake, pieced together from memory and scraps left over. It told the history of die-ins, vigils, lock-ons and ceremonial occupations and the worldwide children's march from capital to capital, speaking truth to power that brought things to a stop. And now, in playback, we're caught on camera blocking traffic, flesh against metal, protecting the wild, then talking satyagraha and being the change you want to see as we walk with Siddhartha in the woods while hearing the sounds of trees in the wind, rain on grass, animals feeding.
The day David Attenborough died, the news appeared online mid-morning, catalyst for change, and like fire or flood, it spread across the office. We sat dazed at our desks and searched for words or ways of understanding. After an hour or more of silence, we left our workstations, making sure to turn off all the lights. Days later, I heard that in almost every school across the land, classrooms emptied when teachers broke the news. And the kids held hands in circles, rippling with tears. Factories halted production. Mushrooms and strawberries were left to go round and round on belts, plastic punnets left empty, and pilots quit their cockpits, refused to fly again. That was the start of the Heathrow Nature Reserve. By noon, all cars had been abandoned. Most have been left to rust where they stood, strange totems from the past. And as I walked the 6 miles home, I passed people who needed to talk or share their thoughts. Some just needed a hug. And on that night, it said fireflies across the globe turned out their lights, while howler monkeys howled for hours. And in the Congo, gorillas sat and reminisced. That day has turned into a decade. We still dream of his voice echoing across the blue planet.
Hello, back from the Brink. Thank you for having me at this virtual launch. My name is Lucy H. Friend. You are joined by my garden. I'm hoping there's some birds that will sing in this recording. This is my poem, The Wildening. 1. World is water. Still they stand, the ancient ones, their swollen bark blackened with oil, hollows filled with driftwood salt that squats like dust on the aftermath. Where drowning ends, the ripples rustle, as branches breach like gasping fingers, stretching, pruned to the open sky. They stand still, the ancient ones, their lungs heavy with the sunken air, roots unwavering lapped by seas as dense as fog and bitter as thaw, through the devastating clouds and ritual bathings of the dead. While sisters, their flesh sliced to leaves, lie saturated, their ink bled out like breath, a library burned by flood and waterlogged memory. The ancient ones remain in guardianship, as presently a wicked wind whips the foaming tops, emerged like cloud from stricken seas. Here it is, the crack between water and space, the pocket under the door of the universe, the tree house surface of a forgotten world. Here, she whispers, I have found, snatched from the brink of untold depths. 2. The living. For in the world's wake, for where the sea breaks, for where drowning ends, there is wildening, spread below and tucked into the folding crook of sky, a movement creased like waves, bark-borne, in arcs formed of 1,000 rings. The wildening festers in the fungal rot of woody flesh. It gnaws with gnatty teeth and hisses to the wind-tossed sky, rich with the ferocity of living, the lava of apocalypse, feasting on the belly of the sunken world, seeking what? The fallen stars of night? Dreams unmet by minds die on changing currents, or sink to the bramble-bound orchards of the floor. Hope collects like byproduct, lodged in lungs and tangled roots, knotted to the ancient stumps like ribbon to a maypole. Lost, like ancient lullabies or subaquatic psalms. 3. And yet, while sisters unburied lie saturated, their breath dissolved like planet sea, the guardians remain, as presently 2,000 kinds bring blossom to a broken world, tended symbiotically. Here it is, where hollow tree holds airbound life neath sunken waves like blood vessel. We have been here before. The children of deep waters will learn to bloom like algal poetry, praying all that rusts away will be replaced by wildening. Thank you very much. Sending love to everyone at this time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Metamorphosis by Emily Richards. When I ceased to be a fox and became a woman, I was not surprised. Surprise is when a badger lurks behind the dustbin in King's Cross, when a mouse snatches your chicken bone from under your nose. It's unlikely, it's wrong, and thus it's surprising. Surprising is a cat that barks like a dog, or a dog that stalks away from you delicately like a cat. Surprise can only come upon you in a situation you think you know. But I was an animal. I didn't read fairy tales. I didn't dream of being anything but what I was. I lived in my skin and my fur and my teeth. I bit and gnawed what I could get, and I was always hungry. When I became a woman, it was like changing from a cub to a vixen, just another stage of myself. First I had my russet coat, my slinky, sinuous, spiky tail, then a soft skin, white and pink and red, tender as a cub's paw, apt to become painful in the wind or the sun, the air like a rasping tongue on my teats. But there are no cubs, human or fox, to lick me now, or for me to lick. A hush surrounds me. The noises of the city, the scratch of rats, the soft breath of a pigeon, the scrape, scrape, scrape of beetles in wood are silent now. I sift the world like I've seen men sift sand on a building site, but I see it through glass, remote, silent, and naturally full of human beings. How it came about, I can't tell you. Not because I don't remember, but because I've no words for it. When we wake up in the morning and have grown an inch, do we have words for how the growing felt? But I can tell you instead what I saw, smelt, and sensed after it happened. A sense of time has come to me now with my human form, and this has its advantages. I know when a meal will occur. I know when there'll be food. Not knowing when you'll eat again induces panic, and those who suffer from this panic, human or animal, those who've learned the cunning to steal what they need, are known by more fortunate humans as vermin. But for me, vermin means the snap, crackle and pop of a rat's bones or a pigeon's claws, the feathers I spit out, the organs I chew up. It's what I eat. What I ate. A woman can't eat these things, especially a woman in the middle of London, a woman working in the place I work, in the museum, as I now know it's called. Those pleasures are forbidden. The rich, smooth meat we get for dinner here seems bland by comparison, though there's no denying it that I wolf it up quicker than any of those around me. Some look at me askance. They don't know how I've looked at them back in the days when I hid in the bushes waiting for them to drop their sandwich or casually throw away a leg of chicken, despising their carelessness, amazed at their lack of joy in the face of plenty. Their lack of joy in general, to be honest. Even these dinners don't seem to come naturally to them, but then nothing does. They're a sorry lot on the whole. One human, out of them all, has excited my attention. Another female, at least I think so. Humans seem to worry a good deal about what's male and what's female. As a fox, I want to tell them it's not the words that count, it's the desire. She's handsome with abundant black hair, tucked up enticingly into the nape of her neck, and I expected the male humans to be intrigued, to follow her scent as unerringly as I would track a mouse. But instead, she's always alone, wandering the corridors or off to the park like me, and from what I hear, she's one of those who says they care about nature, whatever that is. I never spoke to her before today, or tonight rather. The moon hung heavy over the square, and the air hung even heavier with rain about to fall. It was hot, and I felt a longing I couldn't name, a kind of grief for myself, a feeling I'd never known in my fox life. I was walking uncomfortably down the street, my heels clacking on the stone, thinking, not for the first time, that there must be a reason why human females wear such painful, peculiar things. Then I saw her. I stopped instantly, moved into the shadow of a tree. It was a lime, deep-scented, and the smell hurt me as if the tree had taken my grief and turned it into a flower. I heard the silence behind the noise of the traffic, the cries of London, all these humans moving as uncontrollably and thoughtlessly as humans do. I've never seen anything else move like they do. They often compare themselves to ants, but for me, there's more sense of purpose in a single ant than in the whole of the human population of London. But a sense of purpose was coming off her like the scent of a day-old cub. A longing reflecting my own resonated in the air between us. My paws tingled with it. I held still, waiting, looking through the damp green darkness into the brightness of those London lights that let nothing sleep. It was the road where the stone lions sit outside the entrance to the museum, and I wondered once again what they're for. They're not real, they can't snarl, they couldn't tear an intruder to pieces. Yet there they sit, lumps of stone, cold and hard, no love or hate in them. But to my surprise, she stopped just there, at one of the stone lions that wasn't a lion. She leant against it heavily, as if she were exhausted. She stroked the stone ear and lowered her head to the stone flanks, alone, lost in her humanness, like they all are. They know so little of the world. An animal isn't just what you see, I wanted to say. It's the smell, it's the fur, the swing of a tail, the grip of teeth. But for her, it seemed a comfort. I could see her body going soft and vulnerable, and I stiffened in fear on her behalf. Humans never seem to know when they're making themselves into prey. So I settled back into the shadows to watch. It's my nature. Then I crept closer. Reprehensible, perhaps. Why get nearer to them if you don't have to? It was curiosity and something else. I could sense her distress as strongly as if it were my own, as if the invisible wall that separated me from my lost world of all that was alive and real had somehow melted and softened. So I crept, but then remembering what I was, I walked. But I'd forgotten about my shoes, those stupid heels. I knew they were good for nothing, and now they were worse than nothing. They gave me away. Instantly her body went stiff, her face rigid. She'd seen me. So now I had to speak to her. Wrong, perhaps, but this creature in front of me was wounded, and the urge, the need to comfort pushed through my new body all the way to my lungs, my throat, my tongue. Are you all right? Oh, those 4 little words. Humans love them, not that they listen to the answer. But I did. I listened fiercely. You could say that my ears quivered. Oh, she hesitated. Of course, I'm fine. You would have smiled, embarrassed, and walked away. I did not. I watched, my eyes fixing more and more tightly onto hers until she looked away. Rather than moving back, like you would have done, I moved closer, hunting down, you might say, the object of my curiosity. I felt a delicious sense of my own audacity to come so close to a human. She closed her eyes, and I could see the tears at the creases of her eyelids. I was tempted to put out my tongue and lick them, but of course I didn't. It would have been too strange. Who knows what it would have done to me? So instead, I put out a hand, and stroked her sleeve. I felt the electric tingle that passes from creature to creature. I jumped back in fear. I'd retreated, then moved forward. Stroked her hand this time. If I'd been a man, she would have been running with her mobile phone, shouting for help. But being a woman, I saw, confers privilege as well as pain. The privilege of intimacy. She opened her eyes. She pulled her russet coat around her, her black heels shining in dead lamps of the city. She looked at me. I waited. I must be... I don't know what I am, she said. I feel so alone. I want to be with them. No. She stopped for a minute, then went on. I want to be them. She looked at the lion. I hate being human. I always have. I want to be one of them. One of the... Why am I even telling you this? This is not the sort of conversation foxes have, and I didn't know what to say. She struggled up to her feet, looked out over my shoulder. Look, she said. I turned around. A fox! My kin! My own! My beautiful! Oh, he was moving, purposefully, carefully, down towards the bushes I'd emerged from. Would he smell me? Or would he? Oh, a burst of longing so intense I nearly ran towards him. Then a sudden shock. A horror of loss. I couldn't smell him. I stared until he'd gone, until he'd slunk into the shadows where I longed to be. Then I looked back at her, and what I saw caused my fur to stiffen, my ears to go back on my head, and my lips to draw back from my teeth. My claws vibrated in their sockets, and I gripped tight to the ground. The electricity that just that moment had passed between us fizzed and trembled, warning me, beware. For what I saw in her face was that self-same longing I had just experienced. She wanted the fox, but she was not a fox. She was human. And as her eyes came back to mine, I saw her longing change to a fear mirroring my own. I don't want to be human, she whispered. I want to be one of them. Them? A faint growl rumbled in my body. Anger crawled across my skin. She took a step back, crossed her arms around her body, and began to shake. Her green eyes were luminous, huge. You, she whispered. And as she says it, I feel my humanness recede, withdraw, leave my body and retreat into a tiniest part of my mind. We're not the same, I want to say, but I can't speak anymore. I'm shrinking but growing too into myself, and as I look down at my forehead paws and feel the rush of energy through my tail and hear the click of my claws on the pavement, I feel something else. To paraphrase something I once heard, to lose one's nature once might be a tragedy, but to lose it twice seems suddenly like the utmost carelessness. And now, all at once, as I run down the wet road to the safety of the dark bushes and the fox whose scent is now calling me like my own mother, I suddenly understand the human I've left behind. I understand them all. I understand everything. Their homelessness, their anger, their sadness, their terrible desires, and their love.